You know what nobody tells you? The smartest people in the room are often the brokest, and I've spent 60 years watching this tragedy unfold. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through these 10 brutal truths about why education doesn't guarantee wealth, and why the conventional path leads straight to financial mediocrity. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll discover exactly how to break free from the trap that keeps brilliant people poor, while others with half their credentials build fortunes. So before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this information could be the turning point that separates your financial future from everyone else's. The first devastating truth: you're trading your life for money instead of building systems that work without you. Listen, I've sat in that office in Los Angeles for decades, and I'll tell you something that'll shake you. The education system is a beautiful lie. They trained you perfectly to be an employee. Think about it. Every single year from age 5 to 22, maybe longer, you were conditioned with one core message: study hard, get good grades, land a prestigious job. And you did it. You got that engineering degree, that MBA, that law credential. You can solve differential equations. You can analyze complex legal frameworks. You can do things that would make most people's heads spin. But here's the question. Nobody asked you what happens to your income when you stop working. See, that's the trap. You've been educated to exchange hours for dollars, and you're damn good at it. You might be making $80,000, $150,000, even $300,000 a year. Impressive, right? But you're still in a cage. It's just a nicer cage with better furniture. Because the moment you stop showing up, the moment you stop trading your time, your income stops. Dead. Gone. Finished. Warren and I figured this out early, and it changed everything. We didn't want to work for money. We wanted money working for us while we slept, while we read, while we lived our lives. That's the difference between being employed and being wealthy. Employment is linear. You work an hour, you get paid for an hour. Wealth is exponential. You own assets that generate income whether you're working or not. I'm talking about businesses, stocks, real estate, things that produce cash flow. You buy a piece of a wonderful business at a fair price, and that business works for you. The employees show up, the customers buy, the cash registers ring, and you get your share. That's the game. That's how wealth is actually built. But your education never taught you this, did it? Nobody sat you down and said, hey, the real goal isn't to get a job, it's to acquire income-producing assets. Instead, they trained you to be a sophisticated wage slave. And I mean sophisticated. You can discuss economic theory, you can analyze market trends, you can do all this impressive intellectual work and still live paycheck to paycheck. You want to know something that'll make you angry? I've watched people with high school diplomas who understood this principle become wealthier than doctors and lawyers. Not because they were smarter, but because they focused on the right thing. While the educated folks were climbing the career ladder, these people were building systems. Little businesses, rental properties, stock portfolios that generated income without their constant presence. Here's what I want you to understand. Every hour you spend working for money is an hour you're not spending building wealth. And you've only got so many hours. The clock is ticking. You're getting older every single day. Your time is finite, but your education taught you to sell that finite time for money instead of using that money to buy your time back through investments. This is the fundamental shift you must make. Stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. Stop asking, how can I make more money per hour? And start asking, how can I acquire assets that produce income without my labor? That's the question wealthy people ask. That's the question your education never prepared you to answer. The second brutal reality: your credentials are making you broke through lifestyle expectations you can't afford. Now here comes the part that's going to sting a bit, but you need to hear it. Your education didn't just fail to teach you about wealth. It actively programmed you to stay poor through lifestyle inflation. And this one's insidious because it feels so justified. You spent years getting that degree. You sacrificed. You studied while others partied. You took on student debt. You earned those credentials. So now when you finally land that good job, you feel like you deserve to live a certain way: the nice car, the impressive house, the designer clothes, the expensive vacations. After all, you're a professional now, right? You need to look the part. I've watched this destroy more educated people than any other single factor. They graduate, they get their first real paycheck, and suddenly they're making spending decisions based on what they think successful people should have, not based on what actually builds wealth. It's the most expensive mistake you can make, and almost everyone makes it. Let me tell you something personal. I never cared about impressing people. Never. When I was making good money as a young lawyer, I didn't rush out to buy a luxury car or a mansion. I lived below my means, way below, because every dollar I didn't spend on lifestyle was a dollar I could invest. And those invested dollars, they multiplied, they compounded, they became the foundation of real wealth. But here's what your classmates were doing, and maybe what you're doing right now. They got jobs at consulting firms or tech companies or law firms, started making good money, and immediately upgraded their entire lives. Leased a BMW because I need reliable transportation, and IT projects success to clients. Bought a house at the maximum of what the bank would lend because it's an investment, right? Started eating at expensive restaurants, shopping at upscale stores, taking lavish trips, all because I work hard. I deserve this. You know what that is? That's your education backfiring on you. You're so concerned with signaling your status, with showing the world that you're successful, that you're spending every penny you make, or worse, spending money you don't even have yet through credit cards and loans. Here's a truth that'll set you free. Wealth is invisible. You can't see it in someone's driveway or on their wrist. The truly wealthy person might be driving a 10-year-old car and living in a modest house, but they own millions in assets that are quietly compounding. The person who looks wealthy with the fancy car and big house, they might be leveraged to the hilt, one emergency away from financial disaster. I learned this from watching people for 70 years. The ones who looked richest were often the brokest, and the ones who looked ordinary, sometimes they were sitting on fortunes. Because they understood something crucial, every dollar you spend on lifestyle is a dollar that can't be invested. And that dollar, if invested wisely over decades, could become $10, $20, $50. Think about it this way. When you buy a $40,000 car instead of a $10,000 car, you're not just spending an extra $30,000, you're giving up what that $30,000 could become over the next 20 or 30 years if invested. At a reasonable rate of return, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars you just traded for what? The privilege of sitting in nicer leather while you're stuck in traffic? But educated people have this special vulnerability to lifestyle inflation because they have been conditioned to believe their credentials entitle them to a certain lifestyle. Your law school classmate bought a Lexus, so you feel like you should too. Your MBA friends are living in expensive neighborhoods, so you feel pressure to keep up. It's comparison-driven consumption, and it's lethal to wealth building. Here's what you need to ask yourself, and be brutally honest. Are you buying things because they improve your life or because they improve your image? Are you spending money to be happy or to look successful? Because those are very different things, and confusing them will keep you broke forever, no matter how much you earn. I've seen doctors making $300,000 a year with less net worth than teachers making $50,000. How? The doctor is spending $280,000 maintaining an image while the teacher is saving $20,000 a year and investing it. After a couple decades, the teacher is wealthy and the doctor is still working to support their lifestyle. The brutal truth is this: your education created lifestyle expectations that are actively working against your financial success. Those expectations make you spend money you should be investing. They trap you in a cycle where you need that job, that paycheck, that constant income stream just to maintain appearances. And maintaining appearances is the opposite of building wealth. The final truth: you were taught what to think, not how to think, and it's costing you everything. Now we're getting to the core issue, the root cause of all these problems. And this is going to challenge everything you believe about education. Are you ready? Here it is. Your education taught you to be smart in ways that make other people rich while keeping you poor. Let me explain what I mean, because this is subtle but absolutely critical. The education system, and I say this as someone who values learning more than almost anything, is designed to create employees, not independent thinkers. It's designed to produce people who can follow complex instructions, solve predefined problems, and operate within existing systems. That's valuable. Society needs that. But it's not the same as teaching you to think independently about wealth. You spent years learning right answers. The teacher asked a question, you gave the correct response, you got an A. You learned formulas, frameworks, methodologies, all created by someone else. You got really good at applying other people's thinking to structured problems. But when did anyone teach you to question the assumptions? When did anyone encourage you to look at a right answer and say, wait, this actually right for me? Never. And that's the trap. Because when it comes to money, following conventional wisdom is usually the path to mediocrity or poverty. The conventional wisdom says go to college, get a job, work for 40 years, retire on Social Security. The conventional wisdom says buy the biggest house you can afford because real estate always goes up. The conventional wisdom says trust financial advisors to manage your money because they're professionals. And you know what? All of that conventional wisdom keeps you poor. I'll give you a specific example from my own life. Back in the late 90s, everyone, and I mean everyone, was buying technology stocks. The internet was changing the world. These companies were going to dominate the future. Stock prices were doubling, tripling. People were getting rich, or so they thought. And all these smart, educated people with MBAs and engineering degrees were jumping in with both feet because, well, everyone else was doing it and they didn't want to miss out. You know what Warren and I did? Nothing. We didn't buy. People thought we were fossils, dinosaurs who didn't understand the new economy. They actually felt sorry for us, but we asked a simple question that our independent thinking trained us to ask: do we understand how these businesses make money? And the answer was no. These companies had no earnings, no profits, just promises and hype, so we didn't invest. 2 years later, it all collapsed. Trillions of dollars vanished. All those smart people who followed the crowd lost everything, but we were fine, better than fine, because we thought independently instead of following conventional wisdom. But here's the thing, educated people are especially vulnerable to groupthink because their entire training taught them to defer to experts, to follow established methodologies, to do what smart people are supposed to do. So when all the other smart people are doing something, it feels safe. It feels correct. It must be right because look at all these educated, successful people doing it. That's exactly backward. In investing, when everyone's doing something, that's usually your signal to do the opposite, or at least to question it deeply. Now, I want to talk about something painful but necessary, the way educated people deal with uncertainty and risk. Your education taught you that there's always a right answer if you study hard enough. Do enough research, gather enough data, and you'll figure out the correct solution. But wealth building doesn't work that way. There's no textbook that tells you exactly when to invest or what to buy. There's no professor grading your decisions. There's just you, the market, and massive uncertainty. And educated people hate that. They hate not knowing. They hate uncertainty. So they do one of two things. They either freeze completely, doing nothing because they can't be certain it's right, or they delegate their financial decisions to experts who claim to have the answers. Both approaches are disasters. The freezing approach means you never invest, never take any risks, never build any wealth. You stay safe and poor. The delegation approach means you hand your money to financial advisors who charge you fees, put you in expensive, actively managed funds, and underperform simple index funds year after year while extracting a percentage of your wealth. Here's what independent thinking looks like in practice. You realize that you don't need perfect information to make good decisions. You realize that simplicity usually beats complexity. You realize that understanding basic principles, buy good businesses at fair prices, be patient, keep costs low, think long-term, will serve you better than any sophisticated strategy some advisor is selling. But your education never taught you to trust simple solutions. It taught you that complex problems require complex solutions, that expertise means sophistication, that if something seems too simple, you must be missing something. So you dismiss the simple approaches and look for complexity, And that's exactly where you get taken advantage of. Let me tell you about financial advisors, because this is where educated people really get destroyed. You're making good money now, so you think, I should get professional help managing this. You go to a big firm, you sit down with an advisor, and this person talks about asset allocation models, risk-adjusted returns, alternative investments, tax optimization strategies, all this sophisticated sounding stuff. And you think, wow, this is complex. I need this person's expertise. No, you don't. In most cases, you'd be better off taking your money, putting it in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund and never talking to that advisor again, because that advisor is going to charge you fees every year, maybe 1%, maybe more, and most of them won't beat the market after those fees. Over 30 or 40 years, those fees will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions, compared to just buying index funds yourself. But educated people fall for it because they assume expertise must be valuable, that professionals must know better than they do. They don't question it because questioning experts goes against everything their education taught them. I've spent my entire career thinking independently, and let me tell you, it's uncomfortable. When everyone thinks you're wrong, when everyone's laughing at your decisions, when you're going against the crowd, it's hard. Your education conditions you to want approval, to want validation from authority figures and peers. Independent thinking means sometimes you don't get that. Sometimes you stand alone. But that's where the wealth is built. Not in following the crowd, not in doing what everyone else does, but in thinking clearly and independently about what actually makes sense. Now, here's something most people never realize. Educated people are actually at a disadvantage when it comes to learning about money. You know why? Because you think you already know. You've got degrees, you're smart, you've succeeded in academics, so you approach financial topics with confidence rather than humility. You think, how hard could this be? I understand complicated topics. I'll figure this out. But money is different from academic subjects. It requires a different kind of thinking, more patience, more emotional control, more willingness to admit what you don't know. And educated people often struggle with that because their entire identity is built around being smart, being capable, being able to figure things out. I've learned more from my mistakes than from my successes. I bought Berkshire Hathaway, a textile company, and it was a terrible business decision. I've admitted that publicly many times. It was a mistake. But, what? I learned from it. That mistake taught me lessons about buying quality businesses that made me billions later. But educated people, they hate admitting mistakes. Their whole lives, mistakes meant bad grades, failure, embarrassment. So they avoid situations where they might make mistakes, which means they avoid the risks necessary to build real wealth. Or worse, they make mistakes but don't learn from them because they can't admit they were wrong. Here's what I want you to understand. Financial success requires you to unlearn some of what your education taught you. You need to unlearn the belief that there's always a right answer. You need to unlearn the habit of deferring to experts. You need to unlearn the fear of making mistakes. You need to unlearn the tendency to seek complexity over simplicity. And you need to learn some new things. You need to learn to think independently even when it's uncomfortable. You need to learn that simple. Repeated consistently over long periods beats sophisticated and complex. You need to learn that patience is more valuable than intelligence when it comes to building wealth. You need to learn that going against the crowd is usually the right move. I'm 93 years old now, and I've seen generations of educated people make the same mistakes. Brilliant people who could have been wealthy if they just thought differently about money. They had the intelligence, they had the work ethic, they had the discipline. They just applied it all in the wrong direction because nobody taught them how to think independently about wealth. But here's the good news, and this is critical. It's not too late for you. I don't care if you're 30 or 40 or 50. I don't care if you've made every mistake I've described today. You can change your approach right now, this moment, and completely transform your financial future. Start by questioning everything you think you know about money. Don't assume the conventional path is right just because it's conventional. Don't assume experts have your best interests at heart just because they're experts. Don't assume complexity is better than simplicity just because it sounds more sophisticated. Start thinking independently. Ask yourself, does this investment make sense based on basic principles? Do I understand how this business makes money? Am I doing this because I think it's smart or because everyone else is doing it? Am I being patient enough? Am I keeping my costs low? Am I thinking long term? Those questions, asked honestly and answered independently, will serve you better than any degree, any credential, any expert advice you could buy. And take action. Don't wait until you know everything. Don't wait until you're certain. Don't wait until conditions are perfect. Start with what you have right now. Start small if you need to, but start. Buy your first shares of an index fund. Make your first investment. Begin building wealth today, even if you don't feel completely ready. Because compound interest doesn't wait for you to feel prepared. Time doesn't wait for you to figure everything out. Every year you delay is a year of growth you're giving up forever. And that's the ultimate cost of overthinking, of waiting for perfect knowledge, of not acting independently. You run out of time. Look, I've been fortunate in my life. Warren and I built something extraordinary with Berkshire. But it wasn't because we were the smartest people around. There were plenty of people smarter than us, more educated than us, more credentialed than us. What we had was the ability to think independently, to be patient, to focus on what actually mattered, and to ignore the noise. You can do the same thing. Your education gave you tools, the ability to analyze, to research, to understand complex topics. Those are valuable tools, but you need to point them in the right direction. Stop using your intelligence to climb someone else's ladder and start using it to build your own wealth. Stop trying to impress people with your lifestyle and start building actual net worth. Stop following conventional wisdom and start thinking for yourself. Stop waiting for permission or perfect knowledge and start taking action. Stop delegating your financial future to people who profit from your ignorance and start taking responsibility for your own wealth building. Do those things, really commit to them, and 20 or 30 years from now, you won't just be financially secure, you'll be wealthy. Not because you're educated, but because you were smart enough to think independently about what your education didn't teach you. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope I've challenged some assumptions, maybe made you a little uncomfortable, definitely given you some things to think about, because you're capable of so much more than just working for a paycheck. You have everything you need to build real wealth, the intelligence, the capability, the time. You just need to apply those resources differently than your education taught you. Make that change. Make it today. Decide that financial freedom is more important than looking successful. Decide that building wealth is more important than following the crowd. Decide that thinking independently is more valuable than having everyone's approval. Make those decisions and stick with them, and I promise you, your future self will thank you. Good luck.